Every day, a truth is revealed.
The first thing to return was the feeling in his wrists. Not the sharp bite of iron, but the dull, echoing ache in the bones where the shackles had been. Barabbas flexed his fingers, the raw skin sticky and foreign. Freedom felt less like a release and more like an amputation. For months, the cold stone of the Antonia Fortress prison had been his world, the distant roar of Jerusalem a memory. Now, that roar was in his ears, and the blinding Passover sun was in his eyes. A soldier shoved him forward out of the shadows of the praetorium and into the boiling courtyard. The name the crowd had chanted still hung in the air, a phantom echo against the stone walls. Not his name, another's. Why him? Why was he Barabbas? The son of the father, a revolutionary, a murderer, standing here blinking in the sun while the other, the quiet Galilean teacher, was taken to his death. It was a trade so profoundly unjust, it felt like a trap. Had the Romans devised a new form of psychological torture, a freedom so steeped in another suffering that it was its own kind of prison? It had to be. In his world, the world of rebellion against Roman steel, mercy was a myth and grace was a fool's word. There was only power and the lack of it. Imagine the whiplash. One moment, you are tasting the metallic tang of your own death, certain of the splintered wood and the agony of the nails. The next, you are walking through a crowd that parts for you, not with respect, but with a confused fear. They stare as if you are a ghost. He could see the thick woolen tunics of the merchants, the linen robes of the Sadducees, all turning away from him to follow the procession. His freedom was an afterthought, a footnote in a story that was not his. He was a walking injustice, a living testament to a broken scale, and the spiritual battle for his soul had just begun, not in a prison cell, but under the open, unforgiving sky. This new, unearned freedom was a heavier burden than the chains had ever been. Barabbas melted into the labyrinthine alleys of Jerusalem, his every instinct screaming at him to flee, to disappear into the Judean hills where he belonged. Yet his feet, seemingly with a will of their own, kept turning back toward the sound of the crowd. It was a single, monstrous voice, a wave of mockery and hatred that pulled him along in its current. He found himself trailing the grim procession as it snaked its way through the upper city towards the Geneth Gate. The air, thick with the smell of roasting lamb for the Passover Seder and the dust of 1,000 sandals, was charged with a venomous energy. He kept his head down, the hood of his cloak pulled low. He was a known man, and while Pilate's pardon was official, the temple guards or a Roman patrol with a score to settle might not honor it. But the risk was a dull ache compared to the sharp, stabbing question in his mind. Who is this man? He began to listen, snatching fragments of conversation from the throngs pressing in around him. He called himself a king, a merchant sneered to his friend. A king with a crown of thorns, the other laughed. A woman, her face streaked with tears, pushed past them. Lies, he healed my son, he made the blind see, she sobbed, her voice swallowed by the jeers. Healer, king, blasphemer. The words created a portrait of a man impossible to reconcile. The men Barabbas led fought for a kingdom of swords and daggers, a kingdom taken by force from the Roman oppressors. They understood injustice as something to be met with greater violence. This Jesus, he gathered, spoke of a different kingdom, a kingdom whose arrival was so threatening that both the eagle of Rome and the elders of Zion had united to crush him. The irony was a bitter poison in his throat. Barabbas, the man of violence, was set free, while the man of peace was condemned for insurrection. The spiritual battle raged within him, a storm of guilt, bewilderment, and a terrifying nascent flicker of awe. He saw him then, stumbling under the weight of the patibulum, the heavy crossbeam. The man's back was a latticework of raw flesh, the result of the flagrum. Barabbas had seen men flogged before. It was a prelude to crucifixion designed to hasten death on the cross. But he had never seen a man endure it and still walk. Every instinct Barabbas had honed for survival, for violence, for rebellion was silent. He was no longer a revolutionary. He was just a witness. He followed the slow, agonizing journey to the place they called Golgotha, a limestone quarry outside the city walls that resembled a skull. The wind was colder here, carrying the stench of death from previous executions. And as the soldiers threw the Galilean to the ground, Barabbas heard the sickening thud of the hammer. It was a sound he had expected to be the last he would ever hear. But the nails were not for him. He watched from a distance, concealed by a cluster of rocks, as they hoisted the central cross into place. It locked into its socket with a gut-wrenching thud. There, against the pallid sky, hung the man who had taken his place. The man who should have been him. The sight was an obscenity. Barabbas had seen death in all its brutal forms, in back-alley brawls and on Roman swords, but this was different. This was not an execution. It felt like a ritual, a sacrifice. The thought came unbidden, a whisper from the Passover preparations that filled the city. The unblemished lamb. The hours bled into one another. The jeers of the priests, the callous laughter of the soldiers gambling for the man's seamless tunic, the weeping of the small group of women at the foot of the cross. It all washed over Barabbas, a symphony of human cruelty and grief. His internal war reached its peak. Part of him, the revolutionary, screamed that this was weakness. This was the pathetic end of a failed Messiah. But another part, a part he didn't know existed, was transfixed by the man on the cross. Amid the insults and agony, Jesus spoke. "Father, forgive them," he gasped, "for they know not what they do," as recorded in Luke 23:34. The words struck Barabbas with the force of a physical blow. Forgiveness? For the men who drove the nails? For the governor who washed his hands? For the mob that screamed for his blood? For him? The concept was so alien, so contrary to the laws of retribution that governed his entire existence, that it shattered his reality. This was a power far beyond the might of Rome, a strength he could not comprehend. It was then that the sky began to change. The midday sun, which had been beating down on the skull-shaped hill, began to fade. A deep, unnatural twilight descended, casting the gruesome scene in an eerie gloom. The jeers of the crowd died down, replaced by fearful murmurs. The spiritual battle was no longer just inside him, it was being waged in the heavens themselves. When the man on the cross cried out his last, and the ground itself shuddered with a violent tremor, the centurion below the cross shouted a verdict that echoed in Barabbas's soul. The battle was over. The injustice he had witnessed was met with a mystery he could never solve. As the terrified crowds began to disperse, beating their chests in remorse, Barabbas did not join them. He simply slipped away, back into the shadows of the city. He was a free man, but his redemption had come at the cost of seeing the only truly innocent man he had ever known die the death reserved for him. He walked away from Golgotha not with the swagger of a pardoned rebel, but with the broken gait of a man who had stared into the heart of a divine love and was now utterly, terrifyingly, and permanently undone. And us? How do we carry the weight of a freedom we never earned? Barabbas was given a second chance he never asked for. What's the biggest second chance you've ever been given? Comment below. I received grace.